Hi, welcome to the Artist Forum. This is really my first episode for this channel, and the purpose of a lot of the first videos I want to do for this channel, I want them to be really solid foundations that the artists, mostly musical artists that I deal with on this channel, they could be foundations for them. And the point of this video is really to focus on ear training for musicians, ear training for, let's say, producers and mixing and mastering engineers, and what they typically say more is like critical listening. Now, I'm going to have like two sections of this video, and the first section of this video is going to be on ear training for, let's say, musicians. And what is that? Well, basically, every language, spoken language to musical language, is built up on itself. And what I mean by that is the English language has letters, the alphabet, the ABCs. And those letters make up words. Those words make up sentences. Those sentences make up paragraphs. Those paragraphs make up pages and eventually make up books, right? Well, how the musical language really follows that is the ABCs, the letters of music, are the notes. Half notes, eighth notes, quarter notes, rests, even quarter rests. Those are the letters of music. The words is what I want to focus in this video about ear training, is really like combinations of those letters. And I'll show you what I mean by that when we get into this video. But, even in the English language, there's only so many words. Well, in the musical language, there's only so many musical words. And if you start to learn to hear them and practice with them, you can really start to hear these patterns, these words. And I struggle with it, and I still struggle with it. I'm still working on it. I'm not saying I'm an expert in any of this. It's something that takes a lot of practice. To work on your ear, to hear types of scales, to hear types of melodic rhythms. If you can train your ear as a musician to better hear these, you're just going to be so much better off So I hope that explains sort of what I'm going to go into the first part of this video. The second part is going to focus in on the critical listening, how you can sort of break up the audible spectrum, and I'll give some examples of using like pink noise or white noise, and how you can sort of do an EQ with a certain cue, and you can really focus in on certain bands listening to noise and start to try to train your ear to hear what those specific regions of frequency sound like. Now, I hope I explained a lot of what ear training is and what the two sections I'm going to focus on this video, so let's get into it. All right, musical ear training. Now, we're going to go into like really simple examples, and then we'll get into more complicated ones, but I just really want to Through this, I want you to really understand what we're really trying to get at here in this video. And it's really just hearing these musical words pop up. When you hear a dot, 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 which this example is, that's like a musical word. And that makes up a musical sentence. And when we get into more complicated examples, you'll see the dot, 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 dot. You'll start to hear these musical words pop up, and you'll be like, oh yeah, that's just 4 16th notes, or like an eighth and then 2 16th notes, or da 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 da, whatever. You'll start to, through practice, you'll start to understand these musical words. So let me play you this simple example, and as you can see here, like this 3-bar phrase is really like a musical sentence. It's made up of 1 bar rest, and then you have 2 measures of just simple 1, 2, 3, 4. But again, it's really simple, but just understand that what a lot of electronic music producers would call this is just like a 4 to the floor type of word. It's da, 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 da. And so just understand that that's the basis that, these musical words make up these sentences. Let me play this for you, and you start to hear these musical words pop up. So now here's another quick example sort of based off of that musical word. It's just slightly different. It's just, this musical phrase now is just a quarter note with a rest, a quarter rest, and then a quarter note and a quarter rest again. So just, I'll play this and you can hear how this musical phrase sort of sounds. So basically, these two really, really simple examples were the musical word was da, 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 da. This musical word is da, da. So we'll get into more examples here, and you'll start to see how these musical words make these musical sentences. All right, so now we're getting into a little bit more complicated of musical words and musical sentences. Now this one would be, the musical letter would be an eighth note, and the musical word would probably be said as these 2 eighth notes, because you can make combinations of these 2 notes with rests, and I'll show you what I mean by that and how you can make different sort of words from it. But let me play you this musical phrase made up of just these musical words here. So notice the last musical phrase was with quarter notes, and it was just da, da, da. This one is da, 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 a little bit faster. All right, so here's sort of a musical phrase that is made up of these musical words that are combinations of what you can make from the first musical word, which was 2 eighth notes. So the first word you can make from this would be 2 eighth notes, which would be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and the second musical word I would say would be over here. It would be an eighth note and an eighth rest. 1, 2, sort of like, the quarter notes. The third musical word out of this would be an eighth rest and an eighth note, which would be sort of like a and. And that's, when you start to hear these things, a lot of producers will start to hear that this is sort of the words that we're making up when we play this, like a lot of EDM music in a way. A lot of the hi-hats are on the and beats, like and that's kind of how you make up that musical phrase, is with this simple musical word right here. The other musical word would just be 2 rests, and that would be like a quarter rest here. So let me play you this musical phrase made up of some of these musical words. All right, so now what I'd like to do is I would like to just do 3 examples, blind examples where you're not going to see what the rhythm is. I'm just going to play it for you. And then it's going to cycle through 2 times. It's going to be just a 3 measure musical phrase, and the first measure is always going to be just a bar rest, but it's going to be then 2 measures of these eighth note, a combination of these eighth note musical words. And as we go through, listen to it the 2 times, and then stop the video, and then write it down and see if you're right in what you heard. Now, this is great exercise for developing that musician's ear. All right, so now we're starting to get a little more complicated, and just understand that a lot of these musical phrases are going to be combinations of these quarter notes even, and then eighth notes, and now these 16th notes. So when I start doing some more combinations of like these musical words that you can make up here, you're going to really see how truly complicated and how really the foundation of music really starts to build now, and how out of these millions of songs, how really in a way, the songs sound different. So just understand that now this is a 3 measure musical phrase, and it's made up of 16th notes. And this now the musical letter would be a 16th note, and now the musical word is these 4/16th notes. So it's 1 and a 2 and a da 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 da. So again, start thinking about when you're listening to music, when you're listening to a singer sing their musical melodic phrase. Are you hearing da 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 da? You'll start to, with practice, you'll start to really make out now these musical words that you hear, and you're like, oh yeah, that was just 4/16th notes, or yeah, that was a eighth note with 2/16th notes after it, or 2/16th notes and then an eighth note. So I'll play this and you'll hear it. It's to a lot of musicians, it's pretty simple. But then I'll do like one example of what you can make out of this, and then I'll do some blind tests for you. One and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a. All right, so here are a few combinations of these musical words that you can make up with these 16th notes now. And now these aren't all the combinations, and just understand once you start getting into smaller musical word lengths, like musical letter lengths, musical note lengths, like 16th notes, 32nd notes, you start to really create complex musical words. And so again, just to see that these first 4/16th notes here, that's like a musical word. And then these 2/16th notes with this eighth note, that's like another musical word. It's 1 and 2 da 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 da, or 1 and a 2 and a, or any combinations of these. These are all just the musical words, the foundation of music that we need to, musicians and artists should really practice hearing the ABCs of their crafts. So let me play you this this musical phrase. I slowed it down to 80 beats per minute because at 100, it was just really, it's getting too fast. I want to slow it down and try to make it easier for a lot of beginning people to really understand what's going on and to hear it better. But just know that the whole point of this video is just for you to practice yourself and know what to practice now, and just maybe go into your DAW or in your home and just play to a metronome and just try, recording down some things, or if you don't have a DAW, some ways to just try to hear these musical words. Now I'll post in the comments some books that I've read and I've worked through, but just know that I'm not an expert in this. Believe me, I'm still, even some of these basic words, I'm just still trying to work on hearing them. And it's a process. You're always learning. You're always going to be getting better. But just know a lot of good musicians, I mean, they can really hear these musical words, just da 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 da. They can just hear these things so well. So let me play this for you. Again, I slowed it down, and then after this, I will play. I won't really do any different musical words. It's just the ones you see here, and I'll just play a few combinations. I'll maybe do a couple examples just so you can hear and practice, and then we'll move on. All right, so in that last example, I put in a lot more repetition, and the reason why I wanted to do that is also show another point here, and that point is that in a lot of songwriting and a lot of melodic writing, especially in melodies and writing music for vocalists, a lot of memorable melodies are in essence repeated da 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 da. And that in essence, when you think about really memorable songs, you'll hear a lot of repetition in those melodic phrases. And that's one big thing to think about when writing songs. And I wanted to sort of interject that here into this in this video is just to say, all right, now like the da 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 da. I mean, that could be, you probably think about, there could be a lot of like decent songs that had that da 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 da. You'll hear these things and you'll start to pick out, well, there's that word da da da, 1 yen, 2 yen, 3 yen, 4 yen. You'll start to hear those things. So that's the whole point of this video, is to really start to understand where the training of the ear, but then also where a lot of this can be applied in songwriting. And so I hope this is helpful and beneficial to you. All right, so the last thing I would like to discuss about ear training, for musicians really, is not ear training in the sense of musical words, the rhythm of that, but it's really the ear training for the harmony, hearing chord changes, hearing notes in the chords. Believe me, I've had, music instructors, professors who have, I'd be playing something and I'd play a dominant 7 flat 9 and like, oh yeah, that's a dominant 7 flat 9. I mean, they are just so experienced that they've just heard the sound of a dominant 7 flat 9. They just heard it so many times. They just know what it is. And it's just practice. Anyone can do it. And I'm here to say, I mean, I'm not great at all this. I'm not an expert in any of this. I'm just starting to really hear these changes, hear these words. But the whole point of this video is to really make other musicians who haven't been really thinking a lot about this to think about it and start really working on noticing these things. I mean, when I was younger and I was learning piano and guitar, I mean, I didn't really think a lot about this. I didn't, I remember my piano instructor trying to get me to, hear, these chords and how they resolve, but I was just young and I just didn't really spend a lot of time thinking about it. Now I really wished I had put in that time then, because over the years, I would say when I started really becoming more aware of this ear training, the only thing that I really was good at is just hearing the basic Ionian major scale, because just practicing it so many times on the piano or the guitar, I mean, I just knew what that major Ionian scale sounded like. I mean, I just knew it. Now, in that scale, could I start on the fifth note and then go up to the sixth, then down to the third, intervals and stuff? I mean, I wasn't that good at it, but if I started right on that, that tonic note, and I went up the scale and then right back down, I mean, I could pretty much know that that's a major scale. And the point to take out of all this is just to really practice this. This takes time to develop, and I'm starting myself getting decent at it, but I'm not great at it. And it just, over time, you'll start to build it and be better as a musician by thinking about this and practicing it and being aware of them. All right, so I'd like to just do a basic example explaining sort of this ear training harmony, how to really hear chord changes. Again, this is really basic, but this basic example really highlights one primary thing about ear training with harmony, is really hearing that dominant to tonic, that 5-to-1 resolution. That's in so many songs and compositions. But this is really, again, a subject matter for a whole nother video. But I just wanted to show this basic example so to understand what I'm talking about with trying to hear harmonies. And as I play this, try to hear that. You see this first chord here is the tonic, it's the 1. Then the second chord is the 4, the subdominant. This one is the dominant, the 5, and then it's going to resolve back to the tonic, the 1. So, I mean, I know I'm kind of jumping into saying 1, 4, 5, tonic, subdominant, dominant, but just understand that, you know, as musicians, you know, music theory is important, but ear training for harmony, to hear these chord changes is really important. So let me play this for you. Okay, so ear training for producers and mixing and mastering engineers really comes down to what's called like critical listening. And what critical listening is there's a couple things. One thing is being able to dissect a track. And what that means is being able to, in a track, being able to hear whatever instruments are in it, being able to hear where instruments are panned. Are they hard panned or just enough, you know, like 75%? You know, are the drums in drummer's perspective or audience perspective? Also, you know, being able to discern types of reverb, like, you know, is that a plate on the vocal? Is that a spring on the guitar? That's one aspect of critical listening. But another one is being able to hear what certain frequency bands sound like. Now, what I'm going to do is at the end of this video here, I'm first going to just sweep through the bands here with what's called pink noise, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a piano, and I'm going to sort of sweep the bands and do the same, and you see if you can try to make out the bands and the piano. But then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do about 3 instances where I'm going to solo a particular band of pink noise and see if you can make out what frequency band I'm in. So it really is up to you to practice this, maybe to come back to this in reference. You're probably already going to, know what, each test was, but it's a way to try to test yourself. So let me do that here. What you want to do is you want to do pink noise. And again, the whole point of this is to just practice this yourself and try to find ways to test yourself. But what you can do here is you can take a pink noise generator. That's what I have here, which is basically equal noise energy per octave. And you just take an EQ where you can audition the bands. And what you do is you just play it and you sweep up and down the frequency spectrum here. And let me do that for you. And then try to listen and try to make mental notes of what each band sounds like. So when I sort of have this little test at the end, you can maybe pick out what frequency band that was. So let me do that for you. So this is just pink noise. This is pink noise. Now let me audition this band. And I hope you have good, you're going to probably have to have good speakers or headphones, but I hear just a lot of rumble in this band. And as I go up, to me it still sounds like, like I'm on like a jet engine or something, or like a rocket or something really far away. But to me, this band always sounded like being on an airplane or something, when it's flying, that air cabin sound. Like this band sounded to me like wind. Or right around here was like what sounded like, static on a radio, which was typically really in this band where it was mostly transmitting. To me, this sounds more like steam from a kettle or something. And as you go higher and higher, you get the point. But go back to that if you can. Well, I know I was talking, but try to make mental references of what each band sounded like to you so you can sort of reference for this test at the end. Okay, so here's the piano. And now I'm just going to do this really quickly, but really the whole point of this video is just to show you ways to practice yourself and to practice working on trying to hear these frequency bands. Now, this may not be the best example, but just try to, as I sweep through the bands here, try to make out what each band sounds like as I sweep through. And then just do this as a reference and then go back and practice yourself on other instruments or other things that you typically produce in. So you can hear a lot of the boominess. So again, that's just a quick example, but that's just ways for you to go and practice yourself, trying to really hear these frequency ranges. Okay, so here's just a quick test. If you go back and review when I swept through the noise bands, or you do this yourself, I know I swept through rather quickly, and what bands did I go through? It was sort of vague, but try to really practice yourself by hearing what each band from, like, say 50 to 100 hertz sounds like, then 100 to 200, then maybe 200 to 400, 400 to 800, just maybe climbing up like that, and really try to be really good at hearing what each of these bands sounds like with noise, and then practice referencing to instruments and stuff. But here's a quick test of, I'm just going to do 3 bands and see if you can maybe pick out where I'm at in each band.